Josh Frydenberg, welcome to the program.
Good to be with you.
And it's been almost a Josh Frydenberg week this week. I mean, in Parliament, you're the one doing all the talking. You're the one getting all the questions, both from the opposition and the Dorothys. They all seem to be coming to you at the moment. Now, tell me, you've had a very big win in the caucus, in your own caucus, because obviously if there's only 5 saying that they reserve the right to cross the floor, you've done remarkably well. In the end, what does it mean, though? Are we going to get more coal-fired power stations out of this? And if so, how will they be financed?
Well, as you know, the coalition has a laser-like focus on getting prices down, and the National Energy Guarantee is just one weapon in our arsenal, Richo. The other things that we've been doing have been taking on the networks, getting better deal for consumers from retailers and reserving more gas for domestic use before it's gone overseas. Now, we got a long, comprehensive, important report from the ACCC. It took 15 months to produce, and it involved the ACCC using their special powers to compel 50,000 confidential documents from the companies. And it did show that there is a need for the government to provide some support for the financing of new generation, which could be coal, could be gas, could be other sources of firm power. Now, the Prime Minister's made it very clear we support this recommendation. It's recommendation 4, and Rod Sims addressed our party room earlier this week. So we'll go ahead, work up those options, the Treasurer and I, for discussion between the Prime Minister and the Energy Subcommittee.
But I still have to get down to the real bottom of the problem here. And in the end, if you want to build a coal-fired power station, it costs billions of dollars. It takes 5 or 6 years to build. You've got to spend up to 50 million on all the things you have to do beforehand with feasibility studies and a whole range of things. I mean, are you going to be helping with a guarantee, with a loan or anything else? Because at the moment, the banks aren't going to lend the money. And so if you don't, then the coal option, really, you can talk about it nicely, but you've effectively closed it off.
No, these are decisions that need to be taken by the market. Now, we approach them by being technology neutral, looking at outcomes as opposed to the inputs. And what Rod Sims said is that new companies that want to build new assets that are not the big 3 retailers can't get access to bank finance because they can't get long-term offtake agreements with large commercial and industrial users. They could only get a 5 or a 6-year offtake agreement. So what Rod Sims has recommended is that the government step in and it provide that backup finance for those long-term offtake agreements so that the companies can actually get the money to build these new assets. That's something we do support, and it's something that could help improve competition in the market.
If that's the case, why is it that those 5 reserved their right to cross the floor? I mean, what did they say in the caucus room to justify crossing the floor? Because for someone like Tony Abbott, who's been the leader of your party, the Prime Minister, and a member of the Liberal Party all his life, basically, it's a huge step to cross the floor. I mean, for George Richardson, it happens every other Friday. He doesn't care. But for somebody like Tony Abbott, it's massive.
Well, as you know, the ability to do it in the Liberal and National parties is quite different to the ability to do it in the Labor Party, where you basically lose your endorsement as a result. Look, I'm confident that my colleagues are all focused on the one goal, namely how to reduce people's power bills. We're having success. Power prices came down from the 1st of July in South Australia, New South Wales and Queensland, and we've seen the wholesale price for power about 25% down this year. But we need to do more. That's where the ACCC comes in. That's what we're talking to the colleagues about. How do we keep the focus on price? How do we get the companies to reduce power prices for Australian families and businesses? Because at the end of the day, that is what is driving us. How do we improve reliability? How do we improve price?
It seems to me that when you're looking at renewables in the future, it comes down to battery technology in the main to be able to store power. That doesn't seem to me to be rapidly going ahead, certainly not as rapidly as some of its advocates would like us to believe. And that means, you know, that there can always be a waiting time. Are you confident that the Paris Agreement is worth sticking to, given that it would appear most of the people who've signed up to it aren't sticking to it at all? We appear to be uniquely good in this respect.
Well, as you know, we joined the Paris Agreement during the term of the Abbott government. When Australia makes commitments, it sticks to them. Now, what we need to do is to ensure that we do it in a cost-effective way that doesn't jeopardise our stability in the energy market and the prices of electricity. Now, you refer to storage. That has been the missing piece in the jigsaw, which has not had the level of attention and support that it deserves, and that's what really went wrong, Richo, in South Australia, when they had so much wind and solar power but not enough backup. And it was Malcolm Turnbull who really put this on the agenda. Now, batteries have come down in price by about 50% in the last 5 years, and they'll go down further. And a lot of households who've got solar panels on their roofs are putting in batteries. But the best form of storage for renewables is actually pumped hydro storage, which is what Snowy 2.0 is going to be all about. It's 2,000 megawatts, so it's bigger than Hazelwood, it's bigger than Liddell, and it'll have enough power for 500,000 homes, let alone the 5,000 jobs that it will create. So no wonder even the Labor member for Eden Monaro, Mike Kelly, came out and strongly welcomed the Prime Minister's announcement and our commitment to Snowy. It will be good for the energy system, it will be good for local jobs, and ultimately it will help reduce power prices.
Mind you, is there not talk at the moment that they might even have to shut down Snowy 1 because the amount of water in Lake Yucambine is apparently dropping alarmingly?
Well, of course, hydropower is always dependent on the amount of water that are in the dams, and we saw that challenge that we had in Tasmania when they had a real dry spell, and then they also had the interconnector go out with the mainland, and they were forced to bring in diesel generators into Tasmania basically to keep the power secure. So, but I'm confident that Snowy has the water, has the ability to contribute to the power system as it always has done in the past, and will continue to do so in the present. And that was a great example of nation building by Prime Minister Menzies, Prime Minister Chifley, and the two of them together were able to bring that to fruition, together with 100,000 people working on the project, including my good mate Ed Husick's father.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it brought so many people here who have been wonderful citizens. It was nation building. We don't seem to have done too much since. That's the problem. Now, what about subsidies with the NEG? Where do they go? Because at the moment, as you realise, only too well, the solar and wind farms are getting tremendous subsidies, which isn't available to anyone else. When does that end?
Well, the good news about the National Energy Guarantee is it ends the subsidy game, and it involves no taxes, no trading schemes, and it is totally technology neutral. The subsidies that are currently in place are the renewable energy target, and there were some significant problems with that design. But the large-scale part of that agreement is phasing down, and the price of the certificates are coming down very significantly. And with the small-scale scheme, Rod Sims recommended that it be removed in the next couple of years. So that's an issue that we will consider as one of his recommendations. But there are still two subsidy schemes that have been legislated in place for some years, one for small-scale household solar panels and the other for large-scale wind and solar, but the large-scale wind and solar is phasing down very quickly.
Well, I think that's a good thing if we're going to get anything in the market that makes it even. What about the closure of coal-fired power stations, not just Liddell, but over the next decade? Liddell's not the only one slated for closure, is it?
Well, actually, in the National Energy Guarantee modelling, they're not seeing another closure of a power station over the next decade, other than Liddell, which is scheduled to close in 2022. And one of the good things about the National Energy Guarantee is it puts a premium on reliable power, and it will force the retailers to contract in the market with companies that can provide reliable power, and that can involve coal. So you're much more likely to get coal staying in the system, being valued more than it's even being currently, and being able to provide the backup as more wind and solar comes into the system. So coal will be around for some time to come, Richo.
Now, Josh, I've got to ask you some awkward questions about the reef, because the Reef Foundation and the 443 million. Can we start off with the due diligence? How is it possible to conduct proper due diligence if no one at the Reef Foundation was contacted, as claimed by Anna Marsden, the Managing Director?
Well, the first thing to say to you, Richo, is that when I went on your show on the 20th of May, you welcomed this $500 million funding injection into the reef that we have made. This is a landmark decision which will help protect and save the reef for future generations. Now, my department went through, and myself went through, a ERC cabinet process. Then we met with the foundation. Then the deal was publicly announced, and I finally signed off the appropriations of money to the reef. Now, my department made very clear that this commitment to the reef was helping to meet our objectives to save it, that it would represent value for money, and that it complied with the grant guidelines and the other accountability obligations that we have in ministerial decisions. Now, there were two phases of due diligence. There was the early phase, which involved looking at its governance, its structure, its board membership, its capacity to scale up, its fundraising efforts. And then there was a much more extensive second phase of due diligence, which also involved my department formally engaging the Australian government solicitor and doing a whole series of asset.
But not one question was asked of them. Not one. How is that possible?
Well, through the process, and before I finally ticked off on the money to go to the reef, my department were actively engaged with the foundation and working through all the aspects of due diligence.
Well, the foundation must be lying, because they say that's not the case, and they've said it twice. So I'm not sure who's telling the truth, your department or the foundation. But if you're right, if you went through this terrific due diligence, then you should be able to tell me these things. How much money have they raised in the 18 years that they have been in existence?
They have said, and Anna Marsden was on the 7:30 report, they have been able to raise over $90 million,
right,
25 of which have come from federal and state governments, and the rest had come from non-government sources, including corporate donations as well as philanthropic activities.
Yes, so they've raised $85 million in 18 years, and they employ, I'm told, 6 full-time employees, but 8 people or 10 people or whatever. How do you possibly expect them to gear up to do what you're asking them to do? And at the moment, before they start this exercise, what percentage of the money they raise goes to administration?
Well, we've made it very clear that it won't be more than 10%, and that is standard for government practices in dealing with outside organisations. If you look at Tony Burke's Biodiversity Fund, it was the same percentage that was allowed for administration.
I can hear the bells ringing again.
That's right.
Unbelievable. Well, look, I'm obviously not going to be able to finish the questioning, but it seems to me the last question.
It's the Senate. It's the Senate. Richo, it's the Senate, so we can keep going.
Oh, thank God for the Senate.
Yeah.
Then let me say, what is the percentage that goes to administration now? If you've said that they can do 10, what do they do now?
Well, they have said it's a higher percentage of that, but when it comes to the government money, we have said it's no more than 10%.
Yeah, but I'm told
that will
it's
be
much
going
higher
to administration.
But I'm told it's much higher. I mean, I've even heard a figure of 45%. But I want to verify that. I want to know how much it is, And then how would you expect them to get that down? Because I don't see how they can. They're going to have to employ a hell of a lot more people to do the task that you've set them.
Well, let's make it clear that this is the largest reef charity in Australia. It has a proven track record. It's been working with the Federal Environment Department for more than a decade. And in fact, Tony Burke, when he was the Minister for Environment, provided millions of dollars to the foundation and talked about its ability to protect the unique values of the reef. When we made this announcement, Tanya Plibersek welcomed it, and also
We all welcome the money,
Anthony
Josh.
Albanese. But Anthony Albanese has said in the Parliament it's a reputable organisation.
I didn't say it's not
so the record does show. Yeah.
I did not say.
Well, the record shows, Richo.
I mean, I can't say that because there's no reason to say it. What I'm worried about is its size. It's nowhere near big enough to do the job. And in any event, why was it done without a tender? And why wouldn't, in any event, the money go to something like the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, the Australian Institute of Marine Science? Why wouldn't they be getting the money? Why wouldn't they, where the expertise is dripping out of them everywhere? They got all the expertise. Now you've given it to them. Well, we've got to go and hire the expertise, or basically they'll use the expertise of the organisations that you already control. It is a crazy thing to do to just wipe those organisations and give it to a tiny little charity. It's extraordinary. This is one of the worst decisions I've ever seen.
Well, Richo, it might surprise you to know that the chairman, the executive chairman of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, Russell Reichelt, is actually on the board of the foundation. It might surprise you to know that the former CEO of the Australian Institute of Marine Science is actually on the board. And it might
I didn't know the second. I knew the first. I knew the first, but that's got nothing to do with it, mate.
And it might surprise... No, but because I'll explain to you that this foundation has worked very effectively and has a very close interaction with the leading organisations that are involved in the reef as it is. Now, we've provided additional funding to the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority as well, but when we made this announcement, Russell Reichelt described it as being a game changer. The Chief Scientist of Australia said it represented a great day for the reef and for science. We had the head of the tourism bodies for the Barrier Reef area and northern Queensland say that this would underpin regional jobs.
They're all talking about the money, Josh, and I agree with it. I think you've done wonderfully to get that much money, but you can't give it to this tiny little mob. It's ridiculous, and you know it is. They're going to have to hire God knows how many people, all of which is administration costs, and you can't answer how much at the moment their costs are in administration. You can't tell me.
I've told you I've told you very clearly, Richo, that we have a 100-page partnership agreement with the foundation that is public, and it says that up to 10% of the contribution can go to
I know you've told me that.
This is very consistent with what government has done with other similar organisations. In fact, when Labor was last in office, and when you asked me a question about not having a tender process, let me remind you that when Labor was in office, and in 2012, the Australian Audit Office did a review of its grants, nearly 400 of them, between the years 2007 and 2010, and found that more than a third of them did not go out to open tender. We have worked with a leading non-government organisation, one that's got a proven track record of working with the department.
I'll make you a bet,
one that is
I'll make you a bet that
based on
one
science,
of Labor's sins amounted to $443 million. I'll bet that not one of those things that didn't go to tender was that big. Well, I mean, you have got to get to the ground rule here, which is that this is a very small organisation getting a huge chunk of government money. And, of course, the other question is, why was it all paid in advance? That's not normal either. Everything about this isn't normal.
Can I just tell you, Richo, can I just tell you, Labor gave out billions, not 443 million, billions, directly to the coal-fired power stations as compensation to the carbon tax without a competitive tender process. So there you go, and that was much more than 443 million.
That's compensation, mate. I mean, you can't compare compensation.
Yeah, compensation for a tax that was abolished.
That's not apples and oranges. That's apples and rocks. You just can't do it. You are not going to get away with this one, mate. I just think you are far better off admitting that. And everybody is delighted that money can go to the reef, this sort of money, because it is.
I'm glad to hear you acknowledge that, Richard.
Our greatest natural asset, and you've done more than any minister, including myself, to get money to it. So I'm delighted with all of that. It is the manner in which you've done it.
Because that's, can I just emphasise, but Richard, can I emphasise that this money is going to end up in the hands of our farmers. 200 million of the 443 is going to improving farming practices to prevent nitrogen sediment and pesticide runoff.
About this.
$100 million of this money is actually going to the scientists so we can develop coral that is heat resistant and light resistant. Money is going to tackling, as you know, the impact of the crown of thorns starfish, which has impacted about 40% of the reef and was around the new environment.
That never stops, right?
But this is all money that is going towards the reef. Our record on the reef is very clear.
No, look, the money I'm delighted about, Josh. You don't have to keep.
But also the plan.
I love
also
the
the
fact
plan.
that you're giving the money. It's terrific. It's just the way you've done it stinks. If you'd done it properly, then all I'd be doing is singing your praises from the rooftops. But I can't do that unless and until you give up on this fantasy. And we all understand that an organisation like this, no wonder the chief executive said it's like winning lotto. For them, it certainly is. Listen, I have to let it go there. I'm so far over time, it's a joke. But I really thank you for coming back and answering the hard questions, because it's not something a minister would do. I'm delighted that you did that, and I congratulate you on doing it, because it's never easy. So thank you very much. And next time, let's just hope we don't have democracy interrupting us at all.
Thanks, mate.
Okay.
All the very best.
Thank you. Josh Frydenberg in Canberra. I'll be back in just a moment with Tim Smith from the Victorian Opposition.